In the movie City of Angels, I've spoiled it. Oh, that's the movie. You didn't know. Nicolas Cage plays an angel by the name of Seth, and like any angels, he can see events before they're about to happen, and like any good angel in the movie, he intercedes subtly to help in human lives to bring out good. And as an angel, the movie shows that there are certain people who at certain times in their life can actually see or feel angels moving around them. And one in particular is Surgeon Dr. Mackie Rice, played by Meg Ryan. And in certain parts of the movie, she sees him and encounters him, and as he feels his presence, and he begins to develop affections for her and strives to reveal himself to her. And as the storyline goes, they begin to fall in love. But it is very limited kind of love, because there are two major dilemmas. The first is that natural barrier between angel life and human life. There are two different worlds, and they both can't exist in two different worlds together. The other barrier is because Seth is an angel, and though he loves her and cares for her and wants to be with her, he is an angel, and because of that, he cannot feel. He cannot feel love. He cannot feel pain. He cannot feel or live out of the fullest of love because he cannot feel. And they both feel this possibility for a transformative, everlasting love, but they are both frustratingly aware of all of the barriers. Aware of the distance, frustrated by the barriers, Maggie wonders if the barriers can ever be overcome. And she has a visit with one of her patients. She's a heart patient, who we learn a little bit later in the movie actually was once an angel himself. And tells her that there is a way, who out of his own love for a woman in the world became human. And says, in communicating with her, there is something about Seth that she needs to know. So she learns the same thing that Seth, we discover in the movie, has been wrestling with. That he has a choice. That he can stay and be an angel, see her for her, care for her, but never be able to feel real love for her, to feel real hope in their relationship, to feel her touch, to feel her presence. And as we learn to smell her, the fragrance of her hair or the touch of her hand. Or, as we discover, he can choose to fall, as it were. But that choice, too, has consequences, like all of our choices in life. If he chooses to fall, not only will he lose his immortality, but he will begin to feel everything that's a part of our human condition. From the highest expressions of love to the deepest and hardest parts of pain and suffering. And we discover in the movie the deepest places of grief. And that's what happens. Because he chooses to fall to finally live his love for her in a love and an experience that not even his mind could prepare him for in its beauty. But she has an accident that he couldn't foresee and that he couldn't prevent. And she dies because of the accident, and she is taken from him. He not only experienced the heights of human love, but now he has been cast into the depths of the pain of deep, disturbing human grief. And in a moment of his deepest grief, he is visited by one of his angel friends, Cassiel, played by Andrew Brager, who has been with him throughout the movie, kind of helping him discuss what he's going to do, whether he's going to stay an angel or fall. And Andrew asks him, after all of this love and joy and all of this pain, was it really worth it? And watching that scene this week, I thought, that's like God with us, for us. God would rather if I could have one breath, one smell of your hair, one touch of your hand, one movement of your heart towards God than an eternity without it. Jesus uses the parable of the 100 sheep and says God would rather leave the 99 sheep, the security and safety of the 99 for the one person who feels lost and unloved and disconnected and all by themselves. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians verse 6 and 7 that Jesus did not count equality with God as something to be grasped, but instead took the form of a human, in fact, a slave or a servant. One breath, one touch, so that you know you will never be alone. And as powerless as we sometimes feel in an age of crisis, to know that you have not just a place of refuge and strength, but a place to be empowered in the storms of life, that we may respond to the crisis of the day, not with despair and hopelessness and apathy, but with love, with compassion, that we may change the script and change the equation we find ourselves in. Now, in reading and watching the scene, I also find myself asking this question. Do I live like Seth? Do I live in such a way? Would I be willing to give up the things I consider important for my time to experience the fireworks of the glory of God's sunset? To experience the glory of God in a budding flower, the tenderness of God in a fluttering butterfly, the warmth of God in a child's embrace, the tender moment of fleeting but powerful sacred glory as you're drinking a cup of coffee or a mug of tea on the back porch in the quietness of one of God's glorious tender mornings. Will I let go of my stuff long enough to discover the intimacy of God in creation itself, much less the love and embrace of someone close to you? What will it take for us to let those go, that we may, like Seth, fall and experience life as God created and gives to us? Last question I have is, what are you and I willing to give up, willing to give ourselves to every day to show love and healing in this world? What heaven, what complacency, what comfortable place, what refuge, what safe place are you and I willing to let go of, that we may compassionately, truthfully, faithfully share God's love in the world? Now, it doesn't take long to read about ISIL and their desecration of sacred sites, and the evil they're doing upon innocent men and women and children, to read about Russia's land grab, or to be caught up in the conflicts of Gaza and Israel, or to watch the events of Ferguson, Missouri for the last 2 weeks and just feel like the world is full of crisis. And then you start reading all of the internet sites, blogs, and Facebook posts where it seems like what everybody's doing, instead of trying to get us to talk with each other and for each other, we're staking out our positions instead of finding ways to learn and grow past our differences. We are in a world of crisis, and what Mark wants to tell us in the middle of a world of crisis is that there is good news, because this is a gospel shared in a time of crisis. And the crisis of Israel in the first century was the Jerusalem temple was destroyed by the Roman occupiers. And what some scholars want us to see in this Gospel of Mark is Jesus reflecting for the angst and anxiety of the people of his day, with the temple gone, with no place to worship, with no sense of identity. Who will we be? And how can we live in this day and age of crisis? This is God's gift for us today. Who are we? And what do we do now? And Mark begins. This is the good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He has no birth narrative. He has no infancy description, no childhood or parenting or checking out Jesus' ancestry or some overarching view of cosmology of where Jesus fits in the plan of God like John. All he does is he says, the good news is here, and it's in the action and presence of Jesus. And then we read a little further and we discover that the good news is here, but now there's crisis. John has been arrested. His followers, people don't know what to do. And what does Jesus do? He goes and preaches good news. Not a little bit farther, more crisis happens again. It's a synagogue and everybody's together and there's demons in the synagogue and people don't know what to do. And what Jesus does is He heals and brings peace. Crisis after crisis after crisis. Jesus does not dither. He does not speak about philosophies and theologies. All He does is act in love and faith to bring healing to the places in which He finds Himself in the name of God. And that is our path to be good news. To help each other be good news when it doesn't feel so good all around us. To encourage each other, to let the Word speak to us, to gather in community, to pray to one another, to worship together, to be in small groups, to help us be good news in the world. My brother told me about his wife who's a teacher who has a colleague that went down to Florida with her husband and their two small children. They were coming back from Florida, but something went wrong with their car. And they were trapped with a dying vehicle somewhere in Florida on one of those hot days. And they found the repair shop, and the people in the repair shop said that it was a service recall issue and they were out of the part that they were looking for. And so there they were, two tiny kids in the middle of nowhere in the hot Florida sun for a parent and any person with two kids. And that, it's a crisis, isn't it? And what happens is that the three servicemen had compassion for these strangers and they volunteered to fix the car and would only charge what it would cost for the part. It's 2 or 3 hours, and that's a long time for children, so they see a restaurant across the road, and they cross a 4-lane highway to go into the restaurant, and they get inside together and start eating, and an old man comes up and sees them and promptly pays for their meal because his own son had died, and his other child now has cancer. And he said, I don't want you to ignore, or I don't want you to miss the power of these moments with your children. A woman in the restaurant overheard their situation, saw what the old man did, and she volunteered her own condo for the family to stay in overnight so that they were safe. It's not going to make the news, is it? It may not even make your smartphone, but it's good news. God's love made real. And that's our challenge, isn't it? In our lives. To leave our own places of comfort and security to be the good news of God's love. To demonstrate to others that God is not dead. That He lives. Let us pray. It's hard, oh God, because we're human. But You call us to something more and richer and deeper. And that means leaving our places of comfort, our own sense of immortality in heaven, in order to extend ourselves in suffering love that others may have life, and discover when we let go of that, all of a sudden our life is made more whole in the process. That is your incarnation in Jesus. Help us, challenge us, give us courage, and help us be good news in a world so often racked with crisis, knowing that as He lives through us, He lives in the lives of others. And all of God's people said, Amen.